Hello, everyone, and welcome to my Earth Woman channel. My name is Patricia Walls, and I wanted to come and share some things with you today. So, I don't know about you, but these are crazy times right now. The energy is very depressing. The energy is isolating. I've heard a lot of people talk about their feeling of being isolated and just feeling out of sorts. And personally, I've had a huge life change. And so I'm kind of feeling that for myself, feeling displaced. And, you know, one of my beliefs is that nothing happens to us that we don't agree to. I believe that for myself. I set this up for myself. It benefits me. Don't think it doesn't benefit me, this life change, but it still is at times chaotic and unsettling. And you know, with the election energies that's going on, there's just a lot going on right now for consciousness as a whole. And so I just wanted to talk with you for a minute and do some work in regards to that, right? In regards to this energy that we're currently experiencing. So those of you who work with me know that I'm a channel, and it is really hard for me to come with any agendas, because as a channel, I agree to be a clear channel for whatever energies are needed at the moment. So we're just going to start out with some light language, some language of light. And those of you that don't know what that is, come back to some of these recordings. There will be explanations. As a matter of fact, let's just talk about that. Let's talk about light language and how it relates to everything that's going on, because there's always a relation, right? There's always a relation. So let me just start out by bringing in some frequencies and codes for us. Ateala hiatiki unko bebe e homaye ne mo ichikarari de elo upa. Do e mahambai elaye chekela rebohoko ipi papai inini mu a. So just concentrate or allow the feelings that you're having right now, whatever those feelings are. Just allow those feelings to come up and to be released, because that is part and partial of what the language of light is. The language of light is our first language. First of all, it's the language that we all used. I used to say spoke, but it wasn't verbal, right? It was telepathic. And so I learn something new every day. I shift my perspectives and my understandings every day. And so this is all part of that, is my understanding, understanding, overstanding that of language, you know, the human language, the English language, not just English, but the human language is filled with programs, hooks, distortions, control mechanisms. And the beings are telling me labyrinths. I don't know why they're telling me labyrinths, but language, the human language, is filled with so many things that are meant to distract us and keep us in confusion, keep us in alignment. And so as an Aries, I am very much against anything that tries to keep me in alignment. you know, maybe it's age, maybe it's my astrological sign, I'm not sure. But anyway, so the language of light is our first way of communication. It was originally telepathic. Everything uses the language of light. Animals, nature as in the plant nation. So all of the nations, the plant, the human, the animal, the sea creatures, all of the elements, the fire element, the water element, the air element, the earth element, everything communicated by this one source language. And there's the story of the Tower of Babel, that humans in particular at one point went into the Tower of Babel. I'm not a Bible scholar, so I can't tell you why we did it. But at one point, humankind went into the Tower of Babel. And when they came out, they were all speaking different languages and could no longer communicate with everything. It is our normal and natural way of being to be able to communicate with everything. And I learned that early in my studies, early in my practice of assisting other people. I learned that there is no difference for me in working with a human or working with an animal or working with trees and plants and rocks and stars. Stars are planets. So excuse the dog. Sorry about that. So all of that is normal and natural, and we should be able to communicate with everything. A lot of people have opened themselves up to that way of communicating. There was one woman, her last name is Smith, and she teaches interstellar communication, which is going back to the old way of communicating with everything. Can't remember what her first name is, but it doesn't matter. And I ran across her when Source, or my beings, were talking to me about being able to communicate with everything. They were telling me that there should be no difference, that I should be able to communicate and do readings or whatever for everything. And so I began to research that because it was a concept that was new to me. And it all evolved, didn't it? It all evolved into my finding the language of light, my finding my alignment with the language of light, and all the work that I do in that. I mean, I've published 3 books on the language of light, and I hold biannual light language immersion weekends, and am now assisting in coordinating a light language conference. All of that's available on my website. This is not a sales pitch. It is simply letting you know that there is information out there on the language of light. There are many people who are sharing about the language of light and how they're using it and how it benefits them. And so back to the point, because I tend to talk in circles, and so I get there eventually. Hopefully you'll stay with me. Maybe I'll be entertaining enough that you'll stay with me. Anyway, the language of light is our original way of communicating with everything. And we lost that through the Tower of Babel. And we're just now beginning to come back to that on a global rating. There are humans throughout time who never lost that connection. And these were considered the wise ones, the holy ones, the prophets, and sometimes the crazy ones. And they continued that communication with the everything. And we put them on pedestals because they were different from us. And sometimes we burned them or killed them because they were different from us. It's not that way so much anymore. It's very vocal. People are very vocal now with their ability to communicate with the everything. And so because the language of light was our original way of communicating, it is a way of receiving, giving frequencies of knowledge and information, healings and alignments. One of the main questions that I get is, what is the translation? Like for the transmission that I gave a few minutes ago, some people would ask, can you translate that for me? What did you say? What did it mean? There is no translation. In my understanding, there is no translation. And to help further explain that, I ran across an article that a woman had written, and I cannot remember her name, so I can't give her credit. I give her credit, but not by her name. But she had written that in her belief system, that one syllable, because we're still using, when we're communicating vocally, we're still using syllables. We still are using a dialect of sorts. And just one syllable, if you're vocalizing it, just one syllable, one click of the tongue, one shrill, however it is that you communicate the language of life, contains thousands of downloads and frequencies of information. So you can't translate that into a human word, no matter what language you speak. And to even try to do so would be an attempt to control it, minimalize it, manipulate it. There are people out there who say that they can translate the language of life. And I don't doubt that they can. I'm just going to give a simple explanation in my understanding. Because I'm a channel, because I'm an intuitive, I very often get intuitive messages. I get intuitive messages 24/7. So why wouldn't I also get them when I'm transmitting the language of light? Correct? And so there are times when I am working with a person, place, or thing, and transmitting the language of light, and I receive an intuitive message. It is not a translation of the transmission of light. It is an intuitive message. It is two different streams of consciousness. That's the way the beings explained it to me. Because we are multidimensional beings, we are never solely focused on anything. We're always doing several things at one time. Many of you may not be able to relate to that, or may not be able to understand. We're going to say understand that. But then there are others that have been labeled ADHD, who totally understand that we're doing several things at one time. And so sometimes I get intuitive messages when I'm channeling or transmitting the language of light, but it is not an interpretation of the energy that's being transmitted or any of that. So some people will ask me why, when I transmit the language of light, and Susan transmits the language of light, or Joshua transmits the language of light, why we sound different. And even I, and we're going to call them dialects because humans have to name things, right? Even I will shift into different dialects from moment to moment. And I asked the beings about that when I was writing my second book about the language of light. I asked the beings to explain that to me so that I could explain it to others, because I got the question a lot. And they reminded me that when we went into the Tower of Babel, we were all speaking the same or communicating in the same way. When we came out, we were speaking different dialects, but it is all still the language of light. It was just frequencies, fragments of the one source language. And so, in other words, the language of light was shattered off into many pieces, many branches. So branches meaning Palladian, Arcturian, French, Spanish, Asian, Japanese, Lakota, Dakota, English. And so all of these languages that we as human beings speak are fractions, are fragments of the one source language. One of my sisters tells a very interesting story. She was giving this man a transmission of the language of light. And afterwards, he told her that he spoke 7 languages. And during her one transmission, he could pick out a word in French, a word in German, a word in Spanish, a word in English, a word in Italian. I don't know. It's just an example, but he was sharing with her that of his 7 languages that he spoke fluently, that she had at least one word from each of those languages in her transmission. Now, this particular sister, when I listen to her transmissions, she always sounds like a little Italian grandmother when she shares the language of light. When I share the language of light, oftentimes people will say that it reminds them of Native American, or it reminds them of an Aborigines, which Native American is Aborigines, but it reminds them of like an African dialect or a Native American dialect or one of those. It is not at all what I hear when I'm transmitting the language of light. And so, even though we are speaking the language of light, we're still only bringing forth a fraction of that, of the power of those frequencies. The beings told me that human beings cannot hold in our 3rd dimensional biological bodies, we cannot hold the immensity of the language of light. We still can only hold fragments of that. Had to check my time, sorry. And so, hopefully that's a good enough explanation for that. So the language of light is not only transmitted vocally, it's also transmitted as singing it. And when I sing it, I sound different to me. And I'll talk about that in a minute. When I sing it, I sound different to me than I do when I'm vocalizing it or speaking it. And when I asked the beings about the difference in that, what they said was that it is a higher frequency. When you're singing it, you are linking into the solfeggio frequencies. And so it's a higher frequency than vocalizing it through human dialects. makes sense to me. Also, we transmit it through hand movements. Some would call those mudras. I very often see people talk with their hands, and it's just a little private giggle that I have going, oh, that's a lot of light language that you're transmitting there. And then some people transmit it through body movements, through sacred dance, hula, and any of the tribal dances. And when you look at the history of the tribal dances and what they were meant, what the intention was for the tribal dances, it's not hard to conceptualize that they are transmitting the language of light in their movements. Every movement is bringing in codes and frequencies of information, are removing, are aligning, healings. And so they're speaking the language of light, singing it, signing it with your hands, the body movements. There's also writing, using symbols, symbology in the language of light. And I don't have any examples that I can grab right now, but if you look on the internet or in any of my books, there are lots of examples of writing the language of light. And also there is simply transmitting, emitting the language of light. And I can only share on this channel, I can only share what my belief system is, what my understanding is. And for me, when we are doing what humans have called Reiki, or hands-on healing, or any energy work, we are emitting the language of light, because the language of light is frequencies, downloads of information, codes of healing, alignment, sacred geometry. I mean, all of that. The language of light is everything. It encompasses everything. And so why wouldn't it also encompass energy healing? It's just that human beings need to name everything. So we've named it Reiki, or energy healing, or quantum healing, or all the ways that humans have labeled it and sold it. But in sharing that with you, how do you feel about that? In what ways can you identify that you're already transmitting the language of light? And also, how do you feel when you're doing those things, when you're speaking a language that you don't understand? And it's not just speaking. One of my spiritual niece whistles, or she calls it the bird language. And I've heard a couple of people transmit light language in that way. They said it's bird chirps to them, and that's how it comes out. There are those that sound very guttural, very dragon-like, you know. There are those that sound very shrill. So they're all mannerisms, all different ways of transmitting the language of light. There's not a right way. There's not a wrong way. The only wrong way is to try to manipulate it and control it, which brings an important sharing here. So to me, the language of light is channeled. And for me, in my own experience with it, I can't recreate a transmission. And when I was sharing that there's vocalizing, they're speaking it, and then they're singing it, I love to sing the language of light, but I can't control it. I have tried because I love singing it. And so very often when I'm facilitating groups, I want to sing it. I take my drum and I want to sing it because it makes me happy. But nothing comes out unless it's meant to, unless I am meant to transmit through song. It does not come out. no matter what I do. Oh, my AC kicked on. So, so when I'm channeling the language of light, I consciously will put aside my ego, just like when I'm channeling anything else. I will consciously put aside my ego and say to the universe, I'm open to be a channel for this healing, for this information, these alignments. And then I wait until I feel the energy, and then I allow it to flow in whatever way it flows, whether it's spoken, sung, hand movements, writing the symbols, moving my body, or just emitting it out. I just allow it. And when you're a channel, that's what you do. You just allow the energy. You're a channel. You're an open channel, and what we sometimes call a hollow bone. And so what does that bring up for you? How are you transmitting the language of light? Very often when I'm doing the light language galleries, which is, it is a class of sorts because there's an introduction, there's an explanation, there is a channeling, a transmission, and then there are questions and answers. And so it is a class of sorts, I guess you would say. But very often, by the end of that, people are identifying that they're already transmitting the language of light. They just didn't know what it was. And so how do you feel about that? In what ways do you feel that you're already transmitting the language of light? And do you want to expand on that? If you want to expand on that, my advice, just do it. Allow the language of light to flow through you, because the more that you allow it to flow through you, the more it opens you up and aligns you with the energy. It's like anything else, practice, practice, practice. And so I hope that you will join me again. I'm going to give you one more transmission though, right? So for this one, I'd like to ask you to just close your eyes and focus in on your body and how you feel right this moment. How do you feel emotionally, spiritually, physically, mentally? How do you feel? Just get a feeling for how you feel. And so when I'm transmitting the language of light, any thoughts, images, feelings, perceptions, knowings that come up for you, just simply say release, because they're coming up to be released. Me hoin pahashale a chikero indara ayene me o tia hala ye chikara you makia bobea atai anawui ate alai e chikelo hoi imakaye de bewa ala ate o chekale wa shelu ui mama yana pande ala ye mayene e kuam Buedaya na ye ni andaye nuana maye chiku libiapa. Uti anda beatea na moe shelin chiku unko. Chupiapa ye enda ne wenimi indu maya na ye ke unga. Uti beata ye dedero oi maye shelu inga ye na maye popa ye doroiba. Ante ana me acheke unko bayende amaya. So what did you notice? What did you release? So very often when people are listening to the language of light, they'll get those odd thoughts, those odd feelings, those odd remembrances, you know, and they'll they'll think of someone that they haven't seen in years or haven't communicated with in years. Well, the whole point of that coming up is to be released. There's something about that that needs to be released that is holding you back, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, or physically. And so if you focus on it, if you get caught up in the third dimensional reality of, why am I thinking that? Why did that come up? I'm supposed to be listening to her. I'm supposed to be focusing and paying attention. If you get caught up in that cycle of holding it into place, then it doesn't release. So you have to release. And it's as simple as just saying, release, or next. Next is one of my favorite tools. So back to, I hope that you will join me again. I hope that this transmission benefited you in some kind of way. And it always benefits me because I'm receiving it as well as transmitting it. So I hope to see you again. So I'll see you soon.